Sarah Martinez had always been particular about her hair. At 28, she worked as a marketing coordinator for a tech company in downtown Phoenix, and her thick waist-length black hair had become something of a signature. Colleagues often commented on how healthy and shiny it looked, cascading down her back in gentle waves that seemed to catch the light perfectly in every meeting room and elevator. Her grandmother had taught her the family secrets passed down through generations. Of Mexican women, weekly coconut oil treatments, careful brushing techniques, and most importantly, finding a stylist who understood the unique needs of her hair type. For the past 5 years, Sarah had been going to Rosa's salon, a small family-owned business, where Rosa herself had been cutting and styling hair for over 30 years. But Rosa was retiring. The news hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach when she walked into the familiar salon that Tuesday morning in March. The warm smell of hair products and the gentle buzz of conversation that usually greeted her felt different somehow. Rosa's eyes were misty as she explained that her arthritis had gotten worse, and she could no longer handle the long days on her feet. Sarah sat in Rosa's chair for what would be the final time, getting her usual trim and deep conditioning treatment. As Rosa worked her magic, running her experienced fingers through Sarah's hair with the gentle confidence of decades of practice, she tried to reassure her longtime client. She mentioned several other salons in the area, even wrote down a few phone numbers on the back of a business card. The problem was that Sarah had never been good with change. She had eaten lunch at the same cafe for 3 years, driven the same route to work every day, and even ordered the same drink at Starbucks, without fail. Finding a new hairstylist felt overwhelming, like trying to replace a family member. Rosa understood her hair's personality, knew exactly how much to trim, and never once had she walked out of that salon feeling anything less than beautiful. For 2 months after Rosa's retirement, Sarah avoided getting her hair cut altogether. She watched as her perfectly shaped layers began to lose their structure, and her ends started to show signs of damage from the harsh Arizona sun and dry air. She tried to maintain her usual routine with the oils and treatments, but without regular professional care, her hair began to lose some of its luster. Her sister Maria noticed first during their monthly dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. She reached across the table and touched the ends of Sarah's hair with a frown. The damage was becoming visible, and Maria, who worked as a nurse and was always practical about these things, insisted that Sarah couldn't wait any longer. That weekend, Sarah spent hours researching salons online, reading reviews, and looking at before and after photos on social media. She made a list of 5 potential places, then narrowed it down to 3. The first salon she called was booked solid for 6 weeks. The second had prices that made her eyes water. The third, however, seemed perfect on paper. Trendy cuts and color. Had a modern website with sleek photos of their industrial chic interior. The reviews were mostly positive, praising the stylists for being creative and up-to-date with the latest trends. The prices were reasonable, and they had an opening that very Saturday morning. When Sarah called, the receptionist was friendly and enthusiastic, asking detailed questions about what she wanted and assuring her that their senior stylist, Derek, was excellent with long hair. Sarah booked the appointment with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She spent the rest of the week mentally preparing herself, looking at photos of subtle layered cuts and imagining how good it would feel to have healthy, professionally styled hair again. She even bought a new top to wear to the appointment, something that would complement whatever Derek decided to do with her hair. Friday night, she washed her hair with her special shampoo and conditioner, applied a light oil treatment, and braided it loosely to prevent tangles while she slept. She had learned these habits from Rosa, who had always emphasized that preparation was just as important as the actual styling process. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah felt optimistic about the next day. She had done her research, found what seemed like a reputable salon, and was finally ready to move forward. Her hair needed professional attention, and she was tired of avoiding mirrors and feeling self-conscious about her appearance. Tomorrow would mark a fresh start, a new chapter in her hair care journey. She had no way of knowing that within 24 hours, she would be sitting in her car in a salon parking lot, crying tears of shock and disbelief, her hands touching what remained of the hair she had spent years carefully growing and nurturing. The decision to trust a stranger with something so personal would teach her a lesson she would never forget, though the price of that education would be far higher than she could have ever imagined. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of bright sunshine that made Phoenix beautiful in the spring. Sarah dressed carefully in her new coral-colored blouse and her favorite jeans, checking her reflection one final time before heading out. Her hair was still in the loose braid from the night before, and she could see the damaged ends peeking out, reminding her why this appointment was necessary. Trendy Cuts and Color was located in a shopping plaza that Sarah had driven past hundreds of times but never really noticed. The exterior was modern with large windows and a sleek black sign. When she pushed through the glass doors, she was immediately struck by how different it felt from Rosa's cozy salon. Everything was white and chrome, with edgy music playing and stylists dressed in all black moving efficiently between stations. The receptionist, a young woman with bright purple hair and multiple piercings, greeted her with professional enthusiasm. She offered Sarah a complimentary coffee and asked her to fill out a new client form while she waited. Sarah found herself missing the familiar warmth of Rosa's place, where everyone knew each other's names, and Rosa would always ask about her job and her family while she worked. Derek appeared after a few minutes, and Sarah's first impression was positive. He was probably in his early 30s, well-groomed with a trendy haircut that suggested he knew what he was doing. His handshake was confident, and he smiled as he introduced himself and led her back to his station. The mirrors were surrounded by bright Hollywood-style bulbs, and his tools were arranged with precise organization. As Sarah settled into the chair, Derek began the consultation process. He ran his fingers through her hair, lifting sections to examine the length and condition. His touch was more aggressive than Rosa's gentle approach, but Sarah attributed this to different techniques. He asked what she wanted, and Sarah explained that she was looking for a trim, maybe 2 or 3 inches, just enough to remove the damaged ends and restore some shape to her layers. Derek nodded and made what seemed like appropriate comments about her hair type and condition. He suggested a slightly shorter cut, explaining that removing more length would help her hair look fuller and healthier. When Sarah hesitated, he assured her that he had worked with many clients who had similar hair, and that trust was an important part of the stylist-client relationship. Something felt off about the conversation, but Sarah couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Derek seemed knowledgeable and confident, and the salon clearly invested in good equipment and training. She decided to trust his professional judgment, though she made sure to emphasize that she didn't want to lose too much length. The shampooing process felt rushed compared to what she was used to, but the products smelled expensive and her hair felt clean and soft afterward. Back at Derek's station, he began sectioning her hair with clips, working methodically from bottom to top. Sarah watched in the mirror as he prepared, noting that he seemed focused and professional. Then Derek picked up his scissors, and Sarah felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and nervousness that always came with getting her hair cut. She had experienced this dozens of times over the years, but it never became completely routine. There was always that moment of surrender, of placing her trust in someone else's hands and hoping for the best. The first few cuts seemed reasonable. Derek was working on the back layers, and Sarah couldn't see exactly what he was doing, but the snipping sounds were steady and controlled. She tried to make conversation, asking how long he had been styling hair and whether he enjoyed working at this particular salon. Derek mentioned that he had been at Trendy Cuts for about 8 months, having moved from a salon in Los Angeles. He talked about loving the creative freedom and the diverse clientele. Sarah found his answers somewhat vague, but chalked it up to professional discretion or maybe just personality differences. As Derek continued working, Sarah began to notice that the pile of hair on the floor was growing larger than she had expected. When she tried to get a better look in the mirror, he gently guided her head back to the position he wanted, explaining that it was important for her to stay still so he could maintain even lines. About halfway through the cutting process, Sarah started to feel genuinely concerned. The snipping sounds were becoming more frequent, and she could feel the weight distribution of her hair changing in ways that didn't match what she had requested. When she asked Derek how much he was taking off, he gave her a reassuring smile and said he was just removing the damaged portions and creating better shape. The salon was busy, with music playing and other stylists chatting with their clients. Sarah found it difficult to concentrate on what Derek was saying over the ambient noise. She kept trying to catch glimpses of her reflection, but between the sectioned hair and Derek's positioning, it was hard to get a clear view of the progress. As Derek moved to the sides of her head, Sarah could finally see some of what he was doing. Her heart began to race as she realized that the hair falling to the floor was much longer than the 2 or 3 inches she had requested. Some pieces looked like they were 4 or 5 inches long, and Derek showed no signs of slowing down. When Sarah tried to speak up, Derek assured her that he knew what he was doing and that she needed to trust the process. He mentioned something about face-framing layers and modern techniques, speaking quickly and continuing to cut while he talked. Sarah felt trapped in the chair, unsure whether to stop him or trust that he had a vision she couldn't see yet. The other stylists in the salon seemed busy with their own clients, and Sarah didn't want to create a scene. She had never been confrontational, and the situation felt surreal, like a bad dream where she couldn't find her voice to speak up for herself. By the time Derek announced that he was almost finished, Sarah could see enough in the mirror to know that something had gone terribly wrong. The moment Derek stepped back and announced that he was finished, Sarah's world shifted. Looking at her reflection in the bright mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back at her. Where her waist-length hair had been just an hour earlier, there now hung a choppy, uneven cut that barely reached her shoulders. But worse than the length was the shape, or lack thereof. The layers were completely wrong. Instead of the subtle, flowing layers that Rosa had always created, Derek had cut harsh, disconnected sections that made her hair look like it had been attacked with garden shears. One side was noticeably shorter than the other, and the back had a strange stepped appearance, as if he had lost track of where he was cutting. Sarah's hands flew to her hair, her fingers encountering empty air where familiar length should have been. The texture felt different too, rough and choppy instead of smooth and silky. In her shock, she couldn't find words, could only stare at the disaster, while Derek seemed completely oblivious to what he had done. Derek was actually smiling, running his fingers through the destroyed remains of her hair as if he was proud of his work. He started talking about how the shorter length would be so much easier to manage and how the layers would give her more volume. His words sounded like they were coming from underwater as Sarah struggled to process what had happened. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely a whisper. She asked Derek if this was what he had planned all along, if this choppy mess was his idea of the subtle trim she had requested. Derek's demeanor changed slightly, and he became defensive, insisting that modern cuts required dramatic changes, and that Sarah would love it once she got used to it. Other clients and stylists in the salon were beginning to notice the commotion. Sarah could see them stealing glances in the mirror, their expressions ranging from sympathy to shock. One older woman getting highlights at the next station caught Sarah's eye in the mirror and shook her head slightly, her face full of understanding and pity. Derek suggested that he could style it for her, that the right products and blow-drying technique would make all the difference. Sarah watched in horror as he began to work styling gel through her hair, trying to create some semblance of intentional design. But no amount of product could hide the fact that the cut was fundamentally wrong, uneven, and unflattering. As Derek worked with the blow-dryer, Sarah's shock began to transform into anger. She had explicitly asked for a trim, had emphasized multiple times that she wanted to keep her length and had trusted this stranger with something precious to her. Now, looking at the mountain of her beautiful hair scattered across the floor, she felt violated and furious. The styled result was somehow even worse than before. The blow-drying emphasized every uneven line and choppy layer. Sarah looked like she had been in an accident or had let a child play hairdresser with her. The face-framing layers Derek had mentioned were actually harsh chunks that made her face look wider and older. When Derek cheerfully announced the price and asked if she wanted to schedule her next appointment, Sarah's composure finally cracked. She told him in a voice that carried across the salon that she would not be paying for this disaster, and that she certainly wouldn't be coming back. Derek's friendly mask slipped, and he became argumentative, claiming that Sarah hadn't communicated clearly what she wanted. The salon manager, a woman in her 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair, approached the situation. Sarah explained what had happened, pointing to the excessive amount of hair on the floor and the uneven results. The manager examined the cut and clearly recognized that something had gone wrong, though she tried to maintain diplomacy between her employee and the upset client. After several minutes of tense discussion, the manager agreed to reduce the price significantly, though Sarah still had to pay something for the time and products used. Sarah felt too exhausted and emotionally drained to argue further. She just wanted to leave, to get away from the bright lights and curious stares and the constant reminders of what Derek had done to her hair. As Sarah gathered her purse and prepared to leave, Derek made one final attempt to salvage the situation. He suggested that she give it a few days, that people often needed time to adjust to dramatic changes. He even offered to fix any minor adjustments for free if she came back the following week. Sarah turned to look at Derek one last time. This stranger who had just destroyed years of careful hair growth in less than an hour. She told him quietly but firmly that there was no fixing what he had done, that some mistakes couldn't be corrected with minor adjustments. The trust required between a stylist and client had been completely shattered. Walking through the salon, toward the exit, Sarah could feel every eye on her. The receptionist with the purple hair tried to make pleasant small talk about her next appointment, apparently not realizing what had just happened. Sarah simply shook her head and pushed through the glass doors into the bright Phoenix sunshine. Standing in the parking lot beside her car, Sarah caught her reflection in the window and started to cry. The tears came suddenly and intensely, a combination of shock, anger, and grief for the beautiful hair she had lost. She thought about all the compliments from coworkers and friends, all the care and attention she had given to growing and maintaining her hair, all of it gone because she had trusted the wrong person. The drive home was a blur of tears and disbelief. Sarah kept glancing in the rearview mirror, hoping somehow that the reflection would be different, that the disaster on her head would miraculously transform back into the hair she had walked into that salon with just 2 hours earlier. The first person Sarah encountered when she arrived home was her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who was watering her garden in the front yard. Mrs. Chen's friendly wave turned into a look of concern and confusion as she took in Sarah's appearance. Without makeup to distract from the disaster, and with her face still blotchy from crying, the full extent of the bad haircut was impossible to hide. Mrs. Chen, who was always kind but sometimes too curious, asked if Sarah was feeling all right. When Sarah briefly explained what had happened at the salon, Mrs. Chen's expression shifted to horror and sympathy. She had known Sarah for 3 years and had always admired her beautiful hair. Seeing it destroyed like this clearly affected her deeply. Inside her apartment, Sarah avoided mirrors as much as possible, but it was impossible to escape her reflection entirely. Every surface seemed to show her the evidence of Derek's incompetence. She called her sister Maria immediately, and when Maria answered the phone with her usual cheerful greeting, Sarah broke down completely. Through tears, Sarah explained what had happened. Maria's response was immediate and fierce anger, the protective fury of a sister who had watched Sarah spend years growing and caring for her hair. Maria wanted to drive to the salon immediately and confront Derek, but Sarah begged her not to make the situation worse. Maria arrived at Sarah's apartment within an hour, bringing chocolate ice cream and a fierce determination to assess the damage. When Sarah finally removed the baseball cap she had put on to hide her hair, Maria's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to anger to deep sadness for what her sister was experiencing. They spent the next several hours researching emergency hair solutions online. Maria found testimonials from other women who had experienced similar disasters, and their stories were both comforting and discouraging. Some had managed to find skilled stylists who could create something workable from bad cuts, while others had resorted to wigs or extensions while waiting for their hair to grow back. The emotional impact was harder to address than the practical concerns. Sarah had never realized how much of her identity and confidence was tied to her hair until it was gone. She felt exposed and unfeminine, constantly touching her head and finding nothing familiar there. The choppy, uneven texture felt foreign. Under her fingers, a constant reminder of the violation of trust she had experienced. Sunday brought new challenges as Sarah faced the prospect of returning to work the next day. She spent hours trying different styling techniques, using every product in her bathroom cabinet to try to create something presentable. Nothing worked. The cut was so fundamentally flawed that no amount of styling could disguise the uneven lengths and harsh layers. Maria suggested a wig as a temporary solution, and they spent Sunday afternoon at a beauty supply store trying on different options. Sarah had never worn a wig before, and the experience felt surreal and depressing. The synthetic hair felt strange against her scalp, and she worried that everyone would be able to tell it wasn't real. The wig they eventually chose was expensive, but looked the most natural. It was similar to Sarah's original hair color and length, though the texture was different, and it would never move or feel quite right. Still, it provided a way for Sarah to face the world while she figured out a more permanent solution. Monday morning at work was an exercise in humiliation, despite the wig. Sarah felt self-conscious and worried that her colleagues would notice something different about her appearance. The wig felt heavy and unnatural, and she was constantly aware of it throughout the day. During lunch, her friend and co-worker Jessica made a casual comment about Sarah's hair looking different, asking if she had gotten it styled somewhere new. Sarah found herself lying, claiming she was just trying a different look, unable to admit what had really happened. The deception made her feel even worse. That evening, Sarah began researching corrective hair specialists, stylists, who specifically worked with clients who had experienced bad cuts. The prices were shocking, often 3 or 4 times what a regular haircut would cost, and most required consultations before they would even commit to working on a damaged cut. She made appointments with 3 different specialists, hoping that one of them would be able to salvage something from Derek's disaster. The earliest appointment was still 2 weeks away, which meant 2 weeks of wearing the wig and feeling like a fraud. The psychological effects of the bad haircut were beginning to affect other areas of Sarah's life. She declined social invitations, avoided places where she might run into people she knew, and found herself obsessing over hair growth timelines she found online. According to her research, it would take at least a year for her hair to grow back to a length she would be comfortable with, assuming she could find someone to properly shape it as it grew. Sarah also discovered online review sites where she could share her experience at trendy cuts and color. Reading other reviews, she found several other clients who had mentioned Derek specifically, and the pattern was disturbing. Multiple people described similar experiences of asking for minor trims and receiving dramatic cuts they hadn't requested. Writing her own review was therapeutic, but also frustrating. She wanted to warn other women about Derek and prevent them from going through what she was experiencing, but she also worried about seeming vindictive or exaggerating the situation. In the end, she wrote a detailed, honest account of what had happened, including photos of the damage. The responses to her review were immediate and supportive. Other women shared their own horror stories about bad haircuts and incompetent stylists. Several people recommended the same corrective specialist, a woman named Elena who apparently worked miracles with damaged hair. Sarah called Elena's salon first thing Tuesday morning and was told that Elena was booked for 6 weeks, but they could put her on a cancellation list. The receptionist was sympathetic when Sarah explained her situation and promised to call if anything opened up sooner. As Sarah prepared for another day of wearing the wig to work, she realized that this experience was changing more than just her appearance. She was learning hard lessons about trust, about speaking up for herself, and about how vulnerable we make ourselves when we place our confidence in strangers. 3 days into Sarah's second week of wearing the wig, Elena's salon called with unexpected news. They had a cancellation for that afternoon, and if Sarah could be there by 2 o'clock, Elena would see her. Sarah left work early, claiming a doctor's appointment, and drove across town with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Elena's salon was nothing like either Rose's cozy family business or the sterile, trendy space where Derek worked. It occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house with warm colors, natural lighting, and an atmosphere that immediately felt safe and professional. The receptionist greeted Sarah by name and seemed genuinely concerned about her situation. When Elena emerged from the back of the salon, Sarah was struck by how different she seemed from Derek. Elena was probably in her late 40s, with silver-streaked hair styled in an elegant bob that spoke to her skill and taste. Her handshake was warm, and her eyes were kind, but also intensely focused as she examined Sarah's disaster. The consultation took nearly 40 minutes, longer than Derek's entire cutting process had taken. Elena asked detailed questions about what had happened, examined Sarah's hair from every angle, and took notes on a tablet. She explained that corrective cutting was as much about understanding the mistakes as it was about fixing them. Elena was honest about the limitations of what she could accomplish. The uneven layers would need to be evened out, which would mean losing more length, though not dramatically. The choppy texture could be softened, and she could create a shape that would grow out gracefully over time. Most importantly, she could give Sarah a cut that looked intentional rather than accidental. The cutting process with Elena was completely different from the experience with Derek. Elena worked slowly and methodically, explaining each step and showing Sarah exactly what she was doing. She never cut more than an inch at a time without pausing to check the shape and balance from multiple angles. Sarah felt herself relaxing for the first time in 2 weeks as Elena worked. The gentle snipping sounds were rhythmic and controlled, and Elena kept up a soothing conversation about hair care, growth patterns, and styling techniques. She shared stories of other clients who had recovered from bad cuts, offering hope and perspective. When Elena stepped back to reveal the finished result, Sarah felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of relief. The cut was shorter than her original hair, falling to just below her shoulders, but it looked healthy, intentional, and flattering. The harsh lines Derek had created were gone, replaced by soft layers that moved naturally with her face shape. Elena spent another 30 minutes teaching Sarah how to style the new cut, recommending specific products and techniques that would help her hair look its best as it grew. She also gave Sarah a detailed timeline for future appointments, explaining how the cut would need to be maintained and shaped during the growing out process. The cost of Elena's correction work was significant, but Sarah paid it gladly. As she drove home, she kept glancing in the rearview mirror, hardly believing that the person looking back at her was the same woman who had left trendy cuts in tears 2 weeks earlier. The next morning, Sarah went to work without the wig for the first time since the disaster. The response from her colleagues was overwhelmingly positive. Jessica, who had noticed something different when Sarah was wearing the wig, complimented her on the cute new cut and asked where she had gotten it done. For the first time since the incident, Sarah found herself able to talk about what had happened, without feeling ashamed or defensive. She shared Elena's contact information with several female co-workers and warned them about her experience at Trendy Cuts. The conversation felt empowering rather than humiliating. Over the following weeks, Sarah established a new hair care routine based on Elena's recommendations. She invested in better quality products and learned styling techniques she had never needed when her hair was long and simple to manage. The process of caring for her recovering hair became a form of therapy, a way of nurturing herself back to confidence. Sarah also became more involved in online communities for women who had experienced similar hair disasters. She found herself offering advice and support to newcomers who were dealing with their own derrick stories. Helping other women navigate the aftermath of bad cuts gave her experience meaning beyond her own recovery. The most significant change was in how Sarah approached service providers in general. She had learned the importance of research, of asking specific questions, and of trusting her instincts when something felt wrong. She would never again allow politeness or social awkwardness to prevent her from speaking up for herself. 6 weeks. After Elena's correction, Sarah returned for her first maintenance appointment. Her hair had grown noticeably, and Elena was able to refine the shape further, adding subtle layers that enhanced the natural movement. Sarah found herself looking forward to these appointments, enjoying the ritual of professional care and the gradual return of her hair's length and health. Elena had become more than just a stylist. She was a trusted advisor who understood Sarah's hair goals and respected her preferences. The relationship felt like what Sarah had lost when Rosa retired, a partnership based on communication, skill, and mutual respect. During one of these appointments, Elena shared that she had chosen to specialize in corrective work after experiencing her own hair disaster years earlier. She understood the psychological impact of a bad cut and had dedicated her career to helping women recover both their hair and their confidence. Sarah realized that her experience, while traumatic, had taught her valuable lessons about self-advocacy, the importance of choosing service providers carefully, and the resilience she possessed when faced with unexpected challenges. She had discovered strength she didn't know she had and had learned to navigate a crisis with grace and determination. The wig still hung in her closet, a reminder of those difficult weeks, but also a symbol of her ability to find solutions and move forward when life didn't go according to plan. 1 year after the disaster at Trendy Cuts, Sarah stood in Elena's salon admiring her reflection in the familiar mirror. Her hair had grown back to a respectable length, just touching her collarbones, and the shape Elena had created was growing out beautifully. The harsh, choppy layers Derek had inflicted were now just a memory, replaced by healthy, well-maintained hair that moved naturally and framed her face perfectly. The anniversary of the incident had not passed unnoticed. Sarah had marked the date in her calendar, not as a day of mourning for her lost hair, but as a reminder of how much she had learned and grown from the experience. She had transformed what could have been simply a cautionary tale into a foundation for personal growth and helping others. Her online review of Trendy Cuts had received over 200 responses from other women sharing similar experiences. Sarah had become an unofficial resource for people seeking recommendations for corrective specialists, and her inbox regularly contained messages from women asking for advice about recovering from bad cuts. Through these interactions, Sarah discovered that Derek had continued his pattern of destructive cutting until Trendy Cuts eventually let him go following multiple complaints. The salon had implemented new consultation procedures and quality control measures, though Sarah felt the changes had come too late for too many clients. More importantly, Sarah had learned to recognize the warning signs she had ignored during her appointment with Derek. His vague answers about his experience, his reluctance to show her what he was doing, and his dismissive response when she expressed concerns were all red flags she would never ignore again. Elena had become not just Sarah's stylist, but a mentor in understanding the relationship between client and service provider. During their appointments, Elena often shared insights about the industry, helping Sarah understand what questions to ask and what standards to expect. This knowledge had extended beyond hair care to other areas of Sarah's life, making her a more informed and confident consumer in general. The experience had also strengthened Sarah's relationship with her sister Maria, who had been her unwavering support during the darkest days of the aftermath. They had grown closer through the crisis, and Maria often joked that she had learned to research service providers almost as thoroughly as Sarah now did, having witnessed the consequences of blind trust. Sarah's co-workers had rallied around her during the recovery process, and several had become clients of Elena's based on Sarah's recommendation. The shared experience had created deeper friendships and a support network Sarah hadn't realized she was building. The financial cost of the experience had been significant. Between Elena's corrective work, the expensive wig, and the premium products needed to repair the damage, Sarah estimated she had spent nearly 8 times what a simple trim at Rosa's would have cost. But she had learned to view this as tuition in an expensive but valuable education. Professional development had been an unexpected benefit of the experience. Sarah's newfound confidence in advocating for herself had translated to more assertiveness at work. She had successfully negotiated a promotion and salary increase, partly by applying the same research and preparation skills she had developed in finding qualified hair care professionals. The most profound change was in Sarah's relationship with her own appearance and self-worth. She had discovered that while her hair was important to her, it was not the foundation of her identity or confidence. The weeks of wearing the wig had taught her that she could face the world and succeed professionally and personally, even when she didn't feel her physical best. Sarah had also become an advocate for consumer protection in the beauty industry. She had researched licensing requirements for stylists and discovered disturbing gaps in training and oversight. She had written letters to state regulators suggesting stronger requirements for continuing education and clearer consequences for professionals who consistently failed to meet basic standards. The online community Sarah had become part of had evolved into a supportive network that extended far beyond hair disasters. Women shared recommendations for everything from medical professionals to financial advisors, all applying the same principles of careful research and verification that had become central to Sarah's approach to choosing service providers. Elena had watched Sarah's transformation with professional satisfaction and personal warmth. During their most recent appointment, she had mentioned that Sarah's recovery and growth had been one of the most rewarding aspects of her career in corrective work. She had seen clients regain their hair, but watching Sarah regain and strengthen, her confidence had been something special. As Sarah prepared to leave the salon that day, she caught sight of a new client in the waiting area, a young woman with a baseball cap pulled low over what appeared to be a recent hair disaster. Sarah recognized the posture, the embarrassment, and the hope mixed with fear in the woman's eyes. Without hesitation, Sarah approached the woman and gently introduced herself. She shared briefly that she had been in a similar situation and that Elena had worked miracles with corrective cutting. The relief and gratitude in the woman's eyes reminded Sarah of her own desperation a year earlier. Elena appeared and welcomed the new client, and Sarah could see the same careful attention and professional compassion that had helped her through her own recovery. As she watched Elena begin the consultation process, taking notes and asking detailed questions, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that another woman was about to receive the skilled care and respect she deserved. Walking to her car in the same parking lot where she had once sat crying over her destroyed hair, Sarah reflected on the complete transformation the year had brought. She had learned that resilience was not about avoiding setbacks, but about how effectively you recover and grow from them. The most important lesson, the one she shared with every woman who contacted her for advice, was elegantly simple. Never let just anyone touch your hair, because in the hands of the wrong person, the damage extends far beyond appearance. But in the hands of the right person, like Elena, the experience becomes an opportunity for healing, growth, and renewal that touches every aspect of your life.